I'm Allie Buckman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to be showing you today how to do this Native American wrap. The fun thing about it is you can change up your pattern and work different patterns into it as you're actually working along the different beads. You can use up a bunch of different seed beads. There's no limit really to the color that you use or how many you use, so it's a fun one to kind of create. It's a good one also for younger kids and early teens or right before that age, that they can play around with patterns, they can play around with the beads and get comfortable with the needle without actually having to do an intense pattern because you're only going through the beads one at a time. So for this, we're going to be using a bunch of 11-Os. If you are teaching younger kids or you do want to use it with a younger group, you can also switch to 8-Os or 6-Os and not have it as many wide. If you want to go wider, you can do that as well. But I'm going to stick to 5 rows of my 11-Os. For this Native American wrap, we're going to be using a number of different materials in addition to my 11-Os. Kind of have a pile of 11-Os here that I'm working with. We'll have the list of the links for the different categories of the beads that I'm using over here on the left-hand side. There's also a drop-down menu on this. Underneath the description, there's a little Show More button. If you hit the Show More button, you'll get a link to all of these. You can either print out that list and take it to your Potomac Bead Company location, or you can shop with us online as well. The links will be right in there. Again, we are using a number of 11-O seed beads. I have on my bead mat 6 11-O seed beads. I have a galvanized dark coral, which is going to be a little bit of an accent color, a Duracoat gold, and a Duracoat silver. I also have a metallic light bronze color, a matte opaque golden olive luster, and then a matte opaque cobalt. So I'm going to be using those 6 colors. Again, you can pick up other colors, you can work with other ones. When you're working with it, you can decide that you want to add others as you're moving along. Just have a pile of beads on your bead mat that look nice color-wise together, and you can kind of work with them. This example here, which I'm just going to be using to show you, as well as some of the different ones that are on the headers of this video, you can pause, look at the different patterns, and get them in line. In addition to my 11-O seed beads, I also am going to need some thread. I'm working with Wildfire 0.006 beading thread. You could also work with the 0.008. It's not going to matter for this project. Even if you were using 15-Os to do this, the 0.006 would work with all of them. So I'm using that thread, and to thread that, I'm going to use a size 10 English beading needle. I'm going to be using the Pony brand beading needle, and I like working with a 10 because it's a little bit stiffer, so it makes it easier to work with, especially because we're not sewing back into the beads really. I'm also going to be using some leather cording. And I have here a 2mm Greek leather, and this is the brown color of the Greek leather. And you can see in this example here we used 1.5mm. I have 2 laying around, so that's what I'm going to use. It's also about the size, thickness-wise of a seed bead, so that'll look nice with it. And you're going to need the length of your wrist for this, plus an additional 6 inches when you're talking about your leather. To close it all off, you are going to need some sort of clasp closure or a button. I'm going to be using a button. Here's just a standard button. I'm going to be using the pewter button in that crystal, or that flower vortex is the name of it. It has a really pretty flower look to it that I think goes well with my colors. I have handy on my bead mat my slip and snip scissors, which I'm going to use to cut the leather and cut my thread as well. I have some pliers sitting here to make it easier to thread my needle. And then also, usually handy, I have some super new glue and a thread burner to work with. To start out with, I'm going to get my leather ready, and I'm going to lay out piles of all of my seed beads. In addition to that, I'm going to cut about 5 feet of my beading thread in that 0.006. So to start out, again, we have our 6 colors, or however many you would like to use, laying here on my bead mat. I also have my 5 feet of beading thread on my needle. And then I have sitting next to me my clasp closure, so my button, and I have my leather. Again, it's going to be double your wrist plus an additional 6 inches. So you want to have enough to go around your wrist and to tie on your button, basically. When you're working with anything that has a pattern, it's oftentimes really easy to kind of get confused at the start and to kind of figure out what you're doing. To make it easier and to aid in that, what you can actually do is create a little grid or a little chart. You can see here, this is literally just on one of my shopping lists. All you need is a piece of paper that has lines on it. You're drawing however many rows wide you have. So you can do it with graph paper if you have it, but just a simple lined paper, or you can even create lines. And what you're going to do is however many beads wide, you're going to do that, and you can kind of create your pattern based in there, see what you want it to look like, and number based on the different colors, and you can work with it with that. I drew a line so I knew kind of where I would be starting in my pattern, and then as I get further towards the end of the pattern, I can see if I want to start that over, if I want to do a new pattern for my next little section. That's kind of up to you. But a simple piece of paper and drawing some lines will help to give you a grid so you can map out exactly what pattern you do if you want to map that out ahead of time. When I'm working with this and I'm looking at the one that's already finished, you can see we're actually going to start at a one bead at a time. So we're going to start with one, and then we're going to increase in order to get to 5. Otherwise, it's really awkward at the end. So we're going to stick to this pattern that I drew out, starting right after the line there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to that point with some of my other beads starting in my pattern. So to start out, I'm going to take my leather here, and what I'm going to do is simply tie a knot. So I have my leather and it's doubled over. I'm going to do it a little bit opposite of what this Native American wrap bracelet is. And this one here started out with the actual button and then came to the end. I'm going to start with the loop and add my button at the end, so that way I don't see any extra knots. It just gives it a little bit more of a polished end. You can do either way though. So I have my loop here. I want to make sure that my loop can fit my button. So I'm going to tie a knot right after where it would fit. And I'm just doing an overhand knot, going the loop through and giving a nice tight pull. This is also why you need those extra 3 inches, because when the knot is done, it'll take up extra room. When you tie on the button, that'll take up some extra room. And then what you want to do is make sure that you can fit this through, the button through the loop. So once you know that button can go through the loop, you're going to give it a nice tight pull, tight tug. Usually what I do is I'll put my finger, you can see I'm putting pressure on here, put my finger into the loop and then give a nice kind of pull on that. Once I have that, I'm going to grab my needle and thread, and I'm going to go down actually to the base of the needle of thread. So I'm going down here to the bottom, pulling the thread the whole way through. And when I get to the base of the thread, or the very end of it, I'm going to take it and tie it around my 2 pieces of leather. If you want to do something similar to this, you can also look at the leather wrap bracelet or the Chandlu style. That will also get you some different details about how to add your beads and how to do some of these knots. So I'm just doing an overhand knot, and you can see I've done it twice. I'm going to do it one more time, and then we get to actually start putting on our beads. So I chose to use the green color of the wildfire thread because I like that green picking up that olivey color of my seed beads. You could also use white or black. If you really want it to match exactly, you can take a Sharpie and actually color your wildfire beading thread, and that'll make it match exactly to your leather if you don't want to see the thread at all. I actually like the look of the thread on the side. I think it gives it a more detailed Native American look. So we will see a little bit of green on the outside of that leather. Once I have that done, I'm going to go to the end of my thread and pick back up my needle. And I'm going to put on my first of my seed beads. So I'm going to put on that dark coral color seed bead and let that drop down next to my leather. That seed bead is going to be the first of my beads and sit right in that corner. It's going to sit right there in the middle. And this first one here, I'm actually going to take the leather and I'm going to take the thread over it. My needle is going to come underneath the leather and back through the seed bead. So you can see there the thread is going over, my needle is going under, and then I'm going to pull it back through. What that's going to do then is get that bead positioned right in the middle there. I want to pull it down as close as I can to my knot, giving a little bit of a pull then on my thread. and I'm actually going to anchor this bead in by going back through the seed bead and under the leather again. So this is the only bead here that we're going to go back through multiple times. We're going to do it at the end as well. That just helps to hold that bead in place because it has nothing else really to anchor onto because there's no other beads there yet. So that's going to hold that bead in place. So that first one there, you have a thread on the top and 2 threads coming out the bottom. Whenever you're adding your next bead, you're going to have a little bit of a thread line that is a diagonal. So you can see one side goes straight across and one side has that diagonal stitch. You could also do this on a loom too if you wanted and just put your leather on the sides. But this way you don't need to have a loom handy. You can just do it with your thread and needle. To put your next beads on, you're going to grab 2 more beads, and I'm going to grab 2 of my cobalt color. So I have 2 beads on. I'm going to take my thread and I'm always going to go underneath the leather before I drop my beads down in. It's important to be consistent. Whichever way you want to do is fine, but be consistent about which way your thread is going. So I'm going to drop it underneath. So when I look at it here, the thread is coming from the bottom. Let's get that over. The thread is going to be coming from the bottom and then going to the top. Let's see it right there. That thread is then going to wrap around the top piece. So we're always starting at the top, going back through the seed beads, and we're going to come out the bottom. When I come out the bottom here, I'm going to give a nice tight pull so that way those 2 beads sit right next to my first bead. And you can see that there. So there you can see you have that thread coming out the bottom here, and that's going to get ready to put on your next beads. So that's going to go underneath the leather, and now I'm going to put on 3 beads at a time. So my group of 3 that I'm going to put on, I'm going to do that as my silver. So I'm going to do 3 beads of my silver and put those onto my thread. Again, I want that thread coming out underneath the leather. And when it's coming out underneath the leather, then it'll pop those 3 beads inside. Those 3 beads then will sit right next to the previous 2. When I go around the top here and come back through, I'm going to go back through those seed beads. So I'm going underneath, over the top, and then coming out underneath, going back through those seed beads. So it's a lot of sewing. That's why I was saying it's great to get kids involved. This is a great one that they're not going back through beads a lot. They're not having to really worry about it. It's a good one just to get them into that habit. When I'm on the other side, I'm going to tuck the thread underneath here, and then I'm going to increase to adding 4 beads onto my leather here. As I'm coming out underneath, we add 4 beads on, and I'm going to add those 4 as my gold color. And now that I have those 4 on, I let them drop down, pull my thread through, again over the top of the leather to underneath. The needle and thread come back down those seed beads, which is going to create that loop on the top. And then once I have that and I'm coming out the bottom, I want to make sure to push all my beads towards that knot. The thread is going to go over the top of the leather, so make sure you force it to there, and then come underneath. When I'm underneath, I'm going to get ready to add my group of 5. So this is going to kind of start my pattern of my bracelet as I'm working with it. So when you look here, you can grab your little cheat sheet if you want, and you can say, okay, I'm adding my beads here. My number 5 is going to be my gold, so you can lay it out if you want to in the pattern of the different numbers. So you can say, oh, okay, the 6th bead in line is this color, 5th in that. That's kind of up to you. But I'm going to start the pattern here where I have my 2 blue. So I'm going to start that V pattern. And then my number 5 is my gold, so I'm going to add my gold one in. And then I have 2 blue. So I have 2 blue, a gold, and 2 blue. Let that all drop back. I'm going to shorten this tail a little bit. And once I have that all back, then I'm going to get into adding the thread around the top. Again, you always want to make sure that you're going from the top of the leather to the back of the leather, and then once the needle is underneath, you're going to go back through your seed beads, come over the top of the leather. So every time you sew, you're starting out on the top. Oops, I got both of them. Somehow I got twisted there. If you have that it gets twisted, just loosen your thread a little bit. I'm going to use my needle to do so. Pull the leather out there. Not sure how it got around there twice. And pull through. It's important at the end of each one that you want to do a nice little tug, so that way you don't have a lot of extra thread showing. Once you're underneath or over the top, you're going to take your thread underneath and add your next collection of beads. So mine is going to be my 2 gold, and then my 4th color, which is going to be that sagey color, and then 2 gold. So from now on, I'm going to do sets of 5, and that's going to start to kind of create that pattern. Over the top, once I'm over the top and coming out underneath, I'm going to take my needle and thread back through those 5 seed beads, pushing them down towards the last ones. Here at the bottom then, I'm going to go over the top and under. Once I'm through here, I'm going to add my next pattern, which is going to be that 5th bead again. And then, so my gold bead, and then a green bead, and then I'm going to introduce my bronze. I'm going to go back to my green and my gold. Drop those down, and once I have those down, I'm going to go over the top of my leather, tuck it underneath, so back through those seed beads, push it down next to the last ones, and continue going underneath and adding my next set of 4. When I'm looking for the next set of 4 or next set of 5, determining kind of what pattern you want, again, you can look back to your cheat sheet if you want. You can kind of see where the pattern's going. You can say, oh, okay, I know that I need a green first because I'm doing that V. So I have my green, and then I have a bronze, and then I'm going to go to my 6th color, which is going to be my red color. Actually, I'll make it my blue color. And then I'm going back to the bronze and the green and creating that pattern. So you can see that V starting to take shape. Going over the top, sewing down through those seed beads again. Once I'm at the bottom then, I want to make sure my thread goes underneath. When I'm coming out here then, I'm going to continue my pattern. And I'm going to do my bronze, then my blue, then my red, and then my blue, and then my bronze. And you can see then that starts that new pattern where the bronze is the V and the blue is starting to come together with it. over the top of that leather. And you can see sometimes I just pull the leather off to the side to get it kind of out of the way. If you do have a clipboard, some people find it easier to work doing this on a clipboard, that you'll have the top clipped. I'm going then underneath, and when I'm through to the bottom here, I'm going to continue on with my pattern and creating that on the opposite side now too. So you almost have a little eye pattern going on. So as I get to the other side here of my middle, and I've used my dark coral bead as my middle bead since it's a little bit brighter, I've chosen to use that one in the actual middle. As I get to the middle, I know that I need to start just repeating the pattern on the outside. So I look back a row, and that's what I'm going to do for the next row. So when I go here to create my next row, I've looked back and I noticed that it's green, bronze, blue, bronze, green. I've done that. Next one back is going to be gold, green, bronze, green, gold. So I'm going to add those in. And as you get your first pattern done, it'll help you to show exactly where you are, because sometimes that beginning can be a little bit difficult to kind of get a hold of. If you do think that you'll get confused, you can also just do one color in the beginning rather than actually having a pattern. Once you have that pulled in there, I'm going to go underneath, and I'm going to look back then to my next row, which is 2 golds and a green. 2 golds and a green, and then 2 golds. I'm going to let those fall. And I'm going to come back down those then. So down through. Over the top of the leather, pushing that last one in, coming underneath, and then I'm going to look back to where this pattern started, and I get to go back to my blue again. So I'm going to do 2 blues and a gold. So I'm going to do 2 blues, gold, 2 blues, and let that drop down. You can see sometimes it gets twisted in the leather. Some people like to have it pinned down on a project board. We have really great hemp project boards or macrame boards. They're really nice. You can kind of use those at the top and kind of hold on to it. I actually prefer to just hold it in my hand. That way I don't have a loom or a project board that I'm trying to hold. But it prevents things like this from happening where you get your leather twisted in your thread. I just simply, with the Greek leather, just pull it out. You won't harm the leather. And then you just pull your thread a little bit tighter. So that's going to be my first little eye pattern that you can see that's happening. I'm going to continue my pattern here by doing a blue and a silver, 2 silvers. Actually, we'll do 3 silvers and a blue. So I have blue, 3 silvers, and a blue. And I'm going to repeat the pattern that I've been doing, but I'm just going to do a different pattern here where I'm connecting them. So I'm switching here and have those blues on the outside, the silver in the middle. And then once I'm there, I'm going to do a row just to separate out my pattern completely. I'm going to do a row of all of my silver beads. And then I'm simply going to repeat. So after I'm done this, I'm literally just repeating exactly what I've done. So starting over then, when you're looking at it, you're going to look back to the previous row and just build backwards. Once you're at the beginning then of building backwards here, you're going to look back to the start and continue on. So you can change up the pattern. You can do the same pattern the whole way. That's kind of up to you. You can do lines. Again, you can make this wider or narrower. If you do want it to be able to have a point section or a diagonal look to it, you do want to do an odd number, just to let you know. But I'm just looking back then, trying to figure out the pattern. I'm basically going backwards now. and figuring out that pattern so I know exactly which beads to put on next. And that's all I'm going to do, continuing the whole length of the bracelet, is continuing that pattern, going back from here on and adding the beads in. So I'm just showing my pattern as I am working with it, and you can see as I go further, the pattern kind of taking more shape. What I actually did was, rather than do those 5 silvers, I decided I wanted a little bit more of that pop of that red, since it was just kind of in the eyes of the diamonds here, so I added more of that pop of red on the outside. And you can see I'm just kind of following the pattern right along and creating that. You can also, in this one here, which was done in our Ocean City store, that was, the pattern was created and mixed. So you can see the pattern was kind of changed up as they were working with it on the sides versus the middle. So you can create more of a variety as you're working with it, but I'm just going to continue that same exact triangular pattern and then that pattern of the blue and silver as I continue down the length of my bracelet. I am going to stop this one right at fit. So when it fits my bracelet, fits my wrist exactly, that's when I'm going to stop my pattern. That way I know that by the time I add my button, it gives a little bit more room to play around and to move around my wrist. But again, I'm just going to keep going with that same pattern, working right along. And if you have a chance, you can even kind of figure out ahead of time how many rows you want to make and what you want your pattern to be on graph paper, or just free it and kind of go as you go and pick up random beads and create V's and diamonds and triangles and all of that fun design. So just continue going on with your pattern and get it to the length again of your wrist. So I'm at the point in my project where, because I usually cut less thread so it stays in frame a little bit better than you guys, I need to actually add some thread. So if you do get to the point that you need to add some thread, you can kind of follow this. If you don't need to add thread, just skip past this point. But where I want to add thread is actually not along the side. See those nice lines going right along the side? I don't want to create a bump or anything on those sides. So I'm actually going to add my thread in the middle where my beads are. So I'm at the end here where I can't really go any further with the thread that I have. So I'm going to actually create a new piece of thread. So I have my new piece of thread. I've added my beads on and I'm underneath the leather. Before I go over the top and back through the beads, I am going to tie on to the pre-existing thread. So with my new piece of thread here, I'm going to tie a knot around the old piece. That allows that knot to move up and down along that old piece of thread. Once I have it nice and tight against the old piece of thread, what I want to do is take off the needle and tie those two thread ends together. I'm going to tie them together once and then switch hands, which creates a square knot, and tie them together one more time. I am going to come back and glue that, but for now I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim down those edges. Once I have those edges trimmed down, I'm going to take my needle and put it on my new piece of thread here. And you can use your pliers if you need to kind of press down on the end, which is going to kind of fan out that thread and make it easier to put on your needle. But I'm going to put my needle on, and then I'm just going to pretend that that knot isn't even there. And I'm just going to continue on with my pattern and my project. And you can see it progressing longer and longer. And we're going to pull nice and tight, and that knot is just going to sit right on the inside of the project. That way you don't see it running down on the nice lines along the side. So I'm at the end of one of my patterns here, and I'm going to go back basically and repeat the start. I'm almost at the end of my bracelet, so I'm going to finish my pattern. If you have a specific pattern that you want to do and you want to know that you're ending at the exact correct space, what you can actually do is, one, either graph it out on graph paper, or two, just start with 2 pieces of leather, tying knots at both ends. So you just start with a plain piece of leather, keep a needle attached and a thread attached to the end rather than tie a knot. You can start at one end and go to the other end and then kind of slide it along the leather as you need to. So that's an idea in case you don't know exactly how long you need it to be. But usually after you do one, you'll get a better idea. But all I'm going to do now that I'm here at the end is repeat my start pattern. So the pattern that I started with, that's what I'm going to end with. So I'm downgrading basically from the 5, which is going to be my next one, down to 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, all I'm going to do is repeat that same pattern, going the opposite direction, back on the rest of this leather. So I'm getting my last bead in place here, and I've downgraded it just like I did on the other side with the same exact pattern going back, and I have my pattern here complete. So I had 5 of those diamonds that I wanted to create, and then I had 4 spacers basically that were created. What I'm going to be doing, just like I did at the start, is everywhere else we've been going back through the bead once, coming to the end here, and then adding the next bead on. Here at the start, we're going to go back through the seed bead again. So the red bead is my last bead, or first bead, is actually going to have 3 threads going through it rather than 2. And that's just going to pull that end in nice and tight together. I'm going to pull again some tension on that, and then I'm going to actually take my needle and thread, and I'm just going to take my needle off, and I'm going to tie a knot around my leather. And that's going to be right after that last bead. That's going to, when you look back at the start, kind of repeat the start there. I'm going to tie that again and end my thread. After I'm done with the threads too, and I have these knots, you can see I'm going around the leather and then creating that knot. After I have that, I am going to go in and do some glue on those, but that'll be after the fact. So I have my knots in place there, and I have my cord ended. And now what I'm going to do is actually put on my clasp closure. So I'm going to go to that Flower Vortex pewter button, and I'm going to slide it onto one side of my leather. If you have a button that doesn't have a shank on it like this one does, you can also use your thread in order to sew on the button. If you are doing that rather than having this thread bunched at the end, I could have sewn through the button there, but you can do that if you're using a cup button. If you want to use a toggle or some sort of clasp like that, you can do that there as well. Here what I'm going to do is just then tie a knot after I have it on one of those leather through the shank, and all I'm going to do is tie a knot right underneath the button. I like these because they have a pretty big raise on them after the shank, so that way I can hide a knot underneath. I'm then going to do a square knot, and I have those 2 knots right underneath the button. Give a nice tight pull, and then when you turn them over and you have your bracelet completed, you won't even see them there in the bottom of the actual clasp. If you do want to see them and you want to get more of that kind of Native American boho look, you can actually create the loop second and do the button first, so that way it's created underneath there, but you are going to see a little bit of that knot then. So either way really is up to you which way you want to create. As I'm finishing here, I will take a little bit of glue and glue down my knot here of my leather, just a tiny little bit inside the knot, and then glue down on anywhere that I added thread or at the start and the end. Once I have that glue on and let it dry, then I'll burn down the ends of my thread with my thread burner, and we're going to trim down the end of the leather with my cutters here. Now that I have it all trimmed down and glued down and done with the thread burner, you can wear your bracelet here, and you can really, like I said, have fun with this. Use different colors, change up the patterns, really kind of go to town with how wide you want to make it or narrow. You can get a really nice pattern out of 5 wide, and that's why I did it. Again, you can create that diagonal pattern with an odd count, so you could do 3, 5, 7, any odd number of counts would get you the diagonal pattern, but you can also have fun with doing a kind of mirrored count with doing evens as well. So have fun creating, use up some random seed beads, purchase some new colors, and really go to town making this Native American wrap in whatever style you would like. If you do need any of these materials, again, they were listed at the start. You can also check out PotomacBeads.com, look at our locations page, and shop with one of our stores. If you can't get to one of our stores, you can always shop on that website online as well. You can follow us on Facebook, as well as subscribe to this channel to get product updates when we get new products in, as well as video updates when we post new things for you guys to enjoy. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and have fun making a Native American wrap bracelet.